This is the Super NT, one of the most important gaming consoles of all time. It was conceived with the purpose of playing some of the most legendary games ever made. It's been engineered to play those games in the absolute best way possible. It's so great, it might even defy gravity. Some of the most legendary games were made in the 16-bit era, timeless classics that developers are still looking to for inspiration. Their look, gameplay, and level design come together to create games that have stood the test of time. But the very time they are standing against has also marched against them, by making it difficult to play them in their intended way. With the rise of modern televisions and their capabilities of displaying higher resolutions, it has become increasingly difficult to play those games without any changes to the gameplay, namely bad image quality and lag that is introduced to the controls. It's something I've tried to figure out in order to get the best image for my Super Nintendo along with zero input lag, like how the games were supposed to be played. It's true that emulation is a great resource for playing games that can produce a great image, but it introduces lag, which can sometimes ruin the gameplay. But there's one company that promises to make SNES cartridges playable on modern HD TVs in their intended way, without lag, in high definition. That company is Analogue. They created an ultra-sleek version of the Super Nintendo. But this isn't just a regular clone console you can buy online. This is a premium system. It has one goal: to play Super Nintendo games in the highest quality possible in the most authentic way. It doesn't only play Super Nintendo games, it also plays Super Famicom games. It could possibly be the best Super Nintendo ever. Why would a company create a device to play old Nintendo games? Surely there's a way to play those old games easily. I mean, those games are over 2 decades old. There has to be a way to play those games without much hassle. Retro games have been released time and time again during the many gaming generations. Some of those games were even re-released for the very next generation of gaming. People absolutely fell in love with these games throughout the years and have wanted to go back and play them. Some of the most beloved games have been bundled together in compilations. Most notably for me is the Mega Man compilations. Also, more recently, the BioShock games were combined onto one disc and given new life on all current systems. Sega has faithfully given new gamers a chance to play their legacy titles with all the compilations of their games. Thankfully, these companies have made these games easily accessible with these re-releases, but not all game developers have the ability or means to do this with their games. Luckily, there are other ways to get games out other than physical game compilations. By far the most convenient and most common way to play retro games has been to play them through emulation. Official emulation and emulation that's not official. I'm going to discuss the official ways to play these games. Emulation is great. It's an inexpensive way to play legacy games. It works by emulating the consoles those games were played on. To break it down into very simple terms, it's dependent on 2 parts: an emulator, which mimics the console, and the ROM, which is the game. The most notable re-releases of retro games was on the Wii's Virtual Console. Nintendo claimed that they custom-tailored each emulator to approximate each console it was impersonating. The Virtual Console allowed Wii owners to pick through a large number of games and download them for a small price. It spanned most of the retro consoles, mainly focusing on the heavy hitters like Sega and Nintendo themselves. It was a fantastic time to be gaming. Other developers went in on the Virtual Console and re-released many of their classic games as well. It was so fun being able to browse the Wii Shop channel with the iconic music playing while you looked at all the games that were only a few clicks away. The amount of titles that were released was amazing. It was a historic event having so many companies come together onto one service. There were people who bought the Wii just for the Virtual Console. It was a one-stop shop for retro games. The downside to the service was the console they were tied to. The Wii, in all honesty, was a great, fun little console. One I really liked and played regularly. The real downside to it was the video output it was designed with. It was only made to be played with composite cables. The Wii came out at an awkward time. HD TVs were expensive and weren't common in every household. so their decision to stick with composite output was understandable. Unfortunately, TV prices started coming down a few years after its release. Nintendo shipped all Wii systems with the standard red, yellow, and white cables. These were outdated immediately. The image quality from these cables is very bad on HD televisions. Even the original Xbox 360 was shipped with component cables. Nintendo did make component cables available, which was the best option for a cleaner picture, which is where the Super Nintendo games shined the brightest. The Virtual Console games were released in their original resolution of 240p. This means that these games play in a very authentic way. When played with component cables, the games look quite nice, especially on a CRT TV that has component inputs. Though I used to play them on my HD TV, and I thought they looked really nice. I do it now, and the picture isn't quite what I thought it was back when I used to play this regularly. The Wii was a great option to play Super Nintendo games. Even though the pixels were a bit soft, it still got the job done. There's also a very controversial topic about input lag on the Virtual Console. I've heard and read over loads of information regarding this. Some people swear that there's no input lag. Others stand firm that there is input lag. Going off my own experience, I felt a small amount of input lag on the game Donkey Kong Country. I've played this game more than any other game ever. It's a fast-paced platformer that requires precise button presses to get through those stages. There is in fact a small amount of input lag on the Wii Virtual Console version. I cut my gaming teeth on the original Super Nintendo, which I still own and play to this day. Which really gets me down because the input lag does take away from the experience, especially if you know how DKC should feel. But the amount of games available can't be overlooked. For the most part, they played well, and it gave me and many others an opportunity to play games we most likely never would have played. With the demise of the Wii Shop channel, these games have become impossible to play officially. But there's good news. Nintendo had a Virtual Console on another system they created, and this one output over HDMI. It's on the often made fun of and ridiculed Wii U. The Wii U did so much right, but couldn't connect with the gaming community during its run. The Wii U's Virtual Console was spectacular, especially for the SNES games. These games cleaned up so well over HDMI. The emulation looks fantastic. These pixels were so sharp at the time. I remember marveling at how well those games looked. I had no hesitation rebuying my games again on the Wii U. I found that the input lag was about the same as it was with the Wii Virtual Console. Many people have said that the lag was unbearable on the Wii U Virtual Console, but I felt that it was about the same as the previous version. The game selection was scaled down as well. Of course, the heavy hitters like Super Mario World and A Link to the Past were available, but the selection was smaller. Despite the lag, these games play and sound very well. After the swift descent the Wii U executed, Nintendo didn't have a platform in place to play their legacy titles on their current system, the Switch. But that didn't stop them from selling those games. They found a way to get the retro titles out for people to buy. They released the extremely limited and mega hyped NES Classic Edition. This is an awesome little novelty console that plays original Nintendo games via emulation. A tiny replica of the real thing that came with an authentic controller. What a magnificent idea. They followed up the NES Classic Edition with the Super NES Classic Edition. This included 21 of the best Super Nintendo games ever made. Games like Super Mario World, The Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past, Super Metroid, Castlevania 4, and Donkey Kong Country. Plus a real game that had never been released until that moment in time. That game is Star Fox 2. It also included 2 authentic to-the-touch controllers. These controllers add so much to the gameplay. Sure, the Wii had the classic controller that was kind of a cure-all retro controller that somewhat resembled the SNES controller. But these games really shine when they are played with the controller that they were developed for. The inclusion of interpolation Nintendo added to these games makes these the best way to play emulated Super Nintendo games. The form factor also helps recreate the experience of playing a real Super Nintendo. But keep in mind again that these games have lag. To me, it's similar to the Wii and Wii U lag times, but it's there for sure. Other than the slight input lag, this is an amazing way to play these games. For $80, it's absolutely worth it. Nintendo has since added a handful of Super Nintendo games to the Switch's online service. These games look almost identical to the games on the Super NES Classic Edition, but run in 1080p. I'm happy to see that they added interpolation to them as well. For $20 a year, it's hard to argue if they are worth it. However, I still think that the Super NES Classic Edition is a better option for the quality game selection. These 2 options are the most feasible and economical way to play these games officially. But what if you want to play Super Nintendo games on your HD TV at the highest quality possible in the most authentic way possible, barring you having to buy something like a FrameMeister or use an OSSC? In 2018, Analogue released the Super NT. It's essentially a Super Nintendo built for our modern day needs. It plays all SNES games and Super Famicom games. And the biggest reason to own one of them is it outputs in 1080p. In fact, this only has a single HDMI port, which is all it really needs. It at one time came in 4 colors: transparent, black, a palette that matches the Super Famicom, and the classic North American colors. For me, it's just not a Super Nintendo without the purple. The Super NT fills a much-needed void in the gaming world. A premium high-definition solution to play physical Super Nintendo games. This runs flawlessly on modern TVs. The image from this is absolutely stunning. These pixels are razor sharp. And to make things even better, it has interpolation for both axes. This makes screen scrolling smoother than you can imagine. It controls amazingly because it uses original Super Nintendo controllers. You can also buy the 8-bit Do wireless controllers, but I'm all in on the wired originals. The experience you get from this far exceeds anything else I've talked about. And the best part, there's absolutely no input lag. The Super NT was priced at $189 when it was available. For me, that's an absolute steal for what it accomplishes. There's something about playing the actual game cartridge the way it was always meant to be played. It makes the experience that much more meaningful. I use the Super NT more than any other console I have to play Super Nintendo games. I even use this to play my Game Boy games. The Super Game Boy is compatible with it and the games look amazing. I even prefer this over the Game Boy player for the GameCube. The Super NT is simple to use. You plug it into the wall in your TV and it's all set up. There's no external scaler with extra wires you have to worry about. It really is something that was needed to play the excellent games in the Super Nintendo game catalog. There are many options out there to play Super Nintendo games, but there's one solution that dominates the rest. Legendary games deserve a legendary console. This is a premium system. It has one goal: to play Super Nintendo games in the highest quality possible in the most authentic way. It's so good it might even defy gravity. It could possibly be the best Super Nintendo ever.